let's get started. So welcome to this webinar, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's such an exciting topic. It's a pleasure for me to talk about this with you today. My name is Oyku Isik. I'm a professor of digital strategy and cybersecurity at IMD. I'm a computer scientist by training, but have always been in this thin line between digital and IT and business and management and strategy. And here at IMD, I do lead a program on cybersecurity risk and strategy and co-direct a program on AI that we call Generative AI for Business. And as someone very interested in privacy and cybersecurity and data protection in general, of course, AI ethics is something I also find very, very interesting. I've been talking about this, I think, since we started having challenges around, for instance, facial recognition systems, right, back in 2018. So now, with the regulations becoming a reality, on top of GDPR, for instance, in Europe, having a specific AI regulations is very, very interesting. So in this webinar, I would like to kind of summarize why, right, we need this, what are the issues that we're seeing out there, and what kind of initiatives we're seeing globally, and what does this mean from a strategic perspective, right? For you, especially, I'm sure you're here because you are either personally interested in AI or your organization is very actively looking into how can we create value with artificial intelligence, generative AI or traditional AI, regardless, we are seeing these regulatory initiatives surrounding us. So let's see what they would mean for all of us. And I look forward to hearing your perspectives on this as well. But of course, as you're all aware, the investment in this topic, as much as this promises, is growing by the day. Goldman Sachs, as you see this graphic on my slide, is also expecting the investment to grow in the next 3 years. So there's definitely hype or not, the attention does not seem to be going down. But what is even more interesting than this, I think, is the profile of people who are very much actively interested in trying this out and playing out with this, as you see here in the BCG survey, is that it's most the leaders of the organization's executives that are really looking into this. So every time we have a program or a session on AI here at IMD, this topic comes up on top, really. What do the regulations mean? What are the implications of AI from a risk perspective? What are the things we need to be careful about? The good thing is, we already by now know that this is beyond the hype, right? We have so many interesting cases that show us what we can accomplish with AI. For instance, I'm just sharing 3 examples that I found interesting from the last few weeks, how AI can unlock now ancient chart text, paper scrolls that used to belong to Caesar's family. Now, thanks to computer vision and machine learning algorithms, we can read what was included in these texts. Or an experiment in China when it comes to diagnosing Parkinson's disease from also using computer vision techniques and observing a human stance and walking and physical stance, for instance. That is super, super important to be able to do this as early as possible. So very promising medical developments. Or thinking from a pure generative AI perspective, what Financial Times is doing next to Bloomberg's, right, next to McKinsey. Here at IMD, we're also experimenting and trying our own IMD GPT. So this text generation and the potential for knowledge management possibilities in organizations. So many good examples surrounding us today when it comes to traditional or generative AI out there. Now, of course, there are also worries that come along with it, especially from a cybersecurity perspective. We know that, like every other new technology, threat actors are also pretty early in adopting and innovating with these new technologies, right? What you're seeing is the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report of 2024 that was published in January. You see that right next to extreme weather events, we have AI-generated misinformation and disinformation as a top risk that is shared by thousands of executives that contributed to this survey. So I wonder. So I'd like to launch my first poll for you here. I wonder what you think about when it comes to AI risk. What are the risks that do you associate with AI? I just gave you a couple of options here. What worries you when it comes to AI? Is it also misinformation and disinformation? Maybe behavioral voter behavior manipulation, for instance, during elections. In a year where the world observes more than 70 elections, we are already seeing deepfakes, for instance, right? That is being used. Or cyber attacks. Is that what comes to your mind the most? Is it intellectual property and copyright infringement? Is it discrimination and potentially biased decision-making tools due to biased data sets or biased algorithms? Or is it something else? What do you think? I'm going to give you a couple of moments to answer this survey. I wonder what is on your mind. And if you say what comes top of my mind is not in the list, please do share it on the chat. It seems more or less there's a balanced distribution, right? This behavioral manipulation, reliability and accuracy issues, hallucinations, clearly, specifically from a generative AI perspective, and discriminatory and biased decision-making tools seem to be on top of your mind. I wonder, and let's stop sharing. I'll just take a quick look at the chat to see if there is anything else that you shared. But yes, clearly, what comes top of the WEF report also is shared among us. And let me share also something else really interestingly. If we look into this topic from a pure cybersecurity perspective, when we look into a global cybersecurity outlook report, what we see is an overall shared notion that people seem to think that especially generative AI will overall provide, at least in the short term this year, provide more benefits to the threat actors than to us. So clearly there's a big rush to benefiting and exploiting these tools out there. Just a couple of weeks ago, we kind of had a glimpse of the extent this could be taken when I think it was in Hong Kong, if I'm not, yes, Hong Kong firm, somebody ended up transferring $25 million on the request of 4 senior executives they talked to over Zoom. And we now know in hindsight that all 4 of these executives were deepfakes, right? So this is an impressive example showing how this technology can also be used. But as you also rightfully highlighted, we are still grappling with reliability issues, hallucination issues when it comes to AI as well. We still do have challenges when it comes to accurate results, or like the 2 cases you see from last year. We know that ChatGPT generated fake litigation examples when a New York lawyer asked for examples surrounding trying to make a case for his case. On the other hand, we also had a litigation that involving Air Canada and a customer where Air Canada's chatbot contradicted Air Canada customer refund policy. So the advice given by the chatbot contradicted the policy of the company, and the judge in this case ruled on in favoring the customer, deeming them eligible for a refund. So it seems like every day most of these things are popping up, whether it's hallucinations or something else. But most of these issues are either occurring because we are trying to use this capability for things that we should not use, or we are kind of testing the limits and learning the boundaries of where this cannot work. And clearly there are more issues than the few examples that we just shared, right? Yes, AI is a threat, or your AI being a critical asset being attacked is one, but something else that we're also seeing a lot of movement in is the sustainability implications of AI. How much energy are we consuming? What is the carbon footprint of the models that we are developing is another question mark, and there's a lot of research actively going on to figure these out. But maybe one dominant thing we seem to hear is biased decision making, right? So police arresting wrong man because of facial recognition systems, for instance, failing. Or on the other hand, we also have reliability and performance related issues. For instance, when it comes to using AI for sensitive decision making scenarios, how do we explain the algorithm? How do we justify the decision making of the algorithm is becoming a more critical issue. Now, there are many things out there. Most of them, some of them are easier to solve than others, but clearly there's also a very actively changing public attitude towards AI out there. I'm just sharing two surveys conducted, one by the Pew Research Center focusing more on the American public and the other more on the Center for the Governance of AI looking into European attitudes. We do see that people tend to increase their expectations when it comes to careful management of AI by organizations, right? So at the end of the day, we see just within 5 years the change in the European public saying that this is a technology that requires careful management. And the American side, we do see people becoming more concerned than excited on AI. Now, some of these issues could be about also being familiar with how and why and what of the technology, but we also see reasons behind these changing attitudes is how organizations are deploying artificial intelligence. So I wonder, here's my second poll question for you. Thinking of the organizations that you are working for, when it comes to managing these kind of risks, right? So cybersecurity or bias in the data sets and etc., where do you see your organizations today? Where do you see your organizations today? Now, I will share the results with you. This very same question was asked in the Gartner Symposium. I think it was back in October with thousands of participants. I wonder if the disc group's evaluations of their own stance would match the results of that conference. So I'll show you where the majority of the participants were, how they responded to this question. Let me give you a couple of moments. As you see here, most of you say that you are reactive. So for those of you wondering the differences, I think it's fair to say that legalistic is more about being driven by whatever is mandated by the legal frameworks you're bound by, right? Reactive is much more observing a problem, experiencing a problem, and reacting to solve the problem. Proactive is thinking forward-looking, thinking what can go wrong, and managing it trying to manage it in a proactive manner. And pervasive means that there is a embedded way of dealing with potential risks and it's the way of doing business, right? So that is clearly the aspiration for organizations. We can stop sharing the poll so that let me also show here what the Gartner result was. In the Gartner Symposium, you see most of the people who responded to the very same question said that we are actually pretty much legalistic. So we really are motivated by what is the stick for us, right? What would happen? When would I be fined? When should I be worried about a litigation and etc.? That's what they is really seem to be motivating most organizations today. And this result seemed to be confirmed by another global survey here. What I'm sharing is McKinsey's State of AI. I think this was published also in the second half of last year. And what you see here is that number of organizations recognizing and proactively working towards mitigating these risks. So dark blue means, yes, indeed, when it comes to AI, inaccuracy is an issue. Cybersecurity is a challenge, right? IP infringement is a challenge. And the light blue bars tell us the percentage of organizations that are actively working towards mitigating this risk. Clearly big room for improvement, isn't there? I think there is, and this, the reason I'm sharing with you all these results is kind of to motivate the thinking behind the current regulatory frameworks that is out there. Clearly, when organizations don't have a constraint, a framework to work within, proactivity comes much more slower, right? It's much more difficult to take proactive action. And at least that is the justification also with European Union's AI Act, saying that we have to have a decision-making mechanism where the citizen and protection of the rights of the individuals is the driving mindset. And let me share another interesting public attitude with you. And this is by the Alan Turing Institute, a bit older a result, even before the EU AI Act was as final as it is today, showing us that what would give public ease of mind is actually having laws of regulations around this and procedures for appealing to decisions. So transparency of what is happening with my data, and also what can I do to initiate objections to organizations if I don't want to be subject to automated decision making, for instance. So this is exactly why we do have today a very active regulatory landscape. So I shared the link there for you to track as well. Last time I checked, all these green countries that you're seeing on this map are the ones that are actively working on the litigation. When it comes to Africa, though, there has been a very recent development that I was reading the other day, that there was a China-African Union statement for increased cooperation in AI. So I think we will also see in the days or weeks to come specific developments in regulatory landscapes only surrounding African countries as well. Now, for some of these countries, it is not as straightforward, or is it not as all-encompassing like Europe is trying to do. For instance, you know that in US there is no countrywide law or regulation, but there's an executive order, and there are some states that are enforcing a bit further decisions than others, right? So it is not all equal across the world, but this is of course a promising picture showing us that everybody is working towards policy making, law making to create those limitations for us to operate within when it comes to AI. I see that there is a question, Sona, you're asking about, there are actually pretty accurate tools when it comes to detecting deepfakes. One example that immediately comes to my mind is what Intel is working on. I want to say, I think the title is Fake Catcher. I want to say, I may be wrong with the title, but I'm sure you'll find it when you look for Intel's tool. It's a very cool technology. What they are doing to detect deepfakes is, imagine you're looking at a video recording of me. This technology will be able to see the blood flow in the veins under my skin. So there's a very specific technology to detect that. And of course, if the technology does not detect a blood flow, they conclude that, okay, there's a digital mask in front of my face, so it's not really me, it's the deepfake of me. And the last time I read about this, the accuracy of this tool was 95 to 97% in detecting deepfakes. And this is just one of the initiatives when it comes to automating the detection of deepfakes. I think that is not the challenge. The challenge is enforcing platforms such as social media platforms where deepfakes are seen the most frequently at, right? To embed such tools, right? To have a mechanism to flag, to have a mechanism to watermark that these are actually deepfakes. If you ask me, it should come directly out of the factory on our mobile phones, right? We should have such technology embedded in these things. But I think that is, the technology is not the challenge. The challenge is having the policies and procedures to make large-scale deployment of such detection tools mandatory for all the organizations and social media platforms. And also, thank you for sharing, Jero. He's saying that the technology is from Adobe. I am pretty sure it was also Intel. Maybe they are working on something quite similar. That's possible. There are different ways of doing this, I think, right? So there are many initiatives. Accuracy is debatable, so they are not all successful, but clearly we're getting there. All right. What I want to do is to talk a little bit about and compare and contrast on the US executive order on AI, the Chinese regulations, because these are the two, when you look into research productivity at the country level, these are the two countries that really leading when it comes to AI research and productivity and creating AI innovation, right? So I think it's interesting to have an understanding of what is the perspective on these in these regions. And for instance, as we mentioned in US, we do have an executive order. It's really more about forcing accountability. Now, what they are doing is forcing institutions that are already established institutions, such as National Institute of Standards and Technology, which also has standards on many different topics, cybersecurity framework being one, to take the responsibility in also being a thought leader in the field, right? So they are, for instance, currently NIST is creating an AI risk management framework, and what the government does is to push that forward and say, here is a ideal guideline for you, follow this one for governance initiatives. So of course, organizations that are either developing or deploying AI models are expected to follow these guidelines. The whole purpose behind this executive order was to set and agree upon a series of best practices. Say, here, this is what we expect you to do, and this is what you also see on my slide deck. For instance, it says we have to have standards, like we discussed now, right? Standards for detecting AI-generated content. Security is a must. You have to have a specific group of people focusing on the security of your product. We have to promote the responsible use of AI, and certain industries there are deemed to be more sensitive than the others, such as healthcare and education and lawmaking as well, are seen to be much more critical than the others. So there's special attention to that, but also maximizing benefits for workers. There is also clear reference to the impact of AI on the future of jobs, and there's this demand for upskilling and reskilling and etc. But overall assessment of this executive order was that this is a more AI industry friendly executive order, and it emphasizes best practices, and it basically provides or suggests a reliance on different agencies to craft their own rules, and basically favoring different industries differently, such as the healthcare, education, and also the technology one. So the criticism behind this has been that, oh, it's too high level, too generic, and it tends to favor industry and innovation more than anything else, has been the criticism that I've been hearing about this one. How about China, you might ask? There's actually recently a couple of really good articles on this that I read. The one that I'm sharing is from MIT Technology Review, 4 things to know about China's new AI rules. Those 4 things are in this analysis is the fact that there is no one big all-encompassing AI law in China, and there is not what they seem to be moving towards. This is also something I've been reading about last year. It seems like China has been pretty good at moving fast in enforcing the regulations that they already have. For instance, one of the first things they did surrounding this topic is regulating recommendation engines, right? So algorithmic decision making, what is being suggested to customers and etc. They have another regulation only targeting deepfakes, for instance, right? So instead of or as opposed to the US executive order that seems to be trying to cover many things, China's approach has been specifically regulating very specific applications of AI, right? Recommendations engines, deep fakes, social media, this or that. So they have been very to the point with what they regulate. And that is why, of course, they were able to move faster when it comes to enforcement. What I've also read that they do have this negative list of use cases and products given to companies. And I did not see this list. If you find it, please send it my way. A negative list saying that do not go after these use cases, then you will be in cross with the government. So negative list more than a positive list saying that don't go there. Comes very close to, as you'll see in a minute, what you also Europe is doing. Also, something similar to the European approach is opening AI models to third-party evaluations. So they're also showing green light saying that there could be these third parties where we give the task of assessing and evaluating AI models to see if they are compliant or not. But something else that is interesting, there's the big topic these days is their perspective on copyright matters. And the current consensus is that Chinese regulations do seem to be significantly more lenient towards copyright matters, and they're not really going to charge issues on this. And the reason behind all this is, of course, they matter. What matters the most to them is staying ahead of the innovation curve and say we want to be the first, keep the productivity in AI innovation. So this is the major differences between these two. And I think Europe's AI Act is somehow somewhere in between. And just a few weeks ago, you may have heard about this. There was a major step also in this process that the Parliament also approved the text. It is not in enforcement yet. It is not final yet. There are still a couple of steps that will need to be taken, but the expectation is that this act will be published officially, and the moment that it is published in the output by the European Council, then it will be deemed official and they will start enforcing it. Very similar to the data protection regulations. The moment it's official, companies will have, depending on where they lie in the risk scale, they will have a year or two to be compliant with the AI Act. There is really good resources that the Commission has provided on this. I've shared one here. There's already a very small compliance checker, a bunch of questions for you to answer and see where you fall on that risk scale, because the European perspective on this has been to only regulate AI applications that they deem to be high risk or medium to high risk, let's say. And just like China, Europe also says there are unacceptable AI models we are completely going to ban, right? They say this is unacceptable risk. You cannot use AI for social scoring. You cannot use it for knowingly, right? Mass surveillance. You cannot use it to manipulate behavior. Think of Cambridge Analytica here. So they are trying to get ahead of issues as such, or manipulating voter behavior with deepfakes, for instance, like we discussed, right? So these are the applications that are completely prohibited. Then there are high-risk AI applications. For instance, think of AI models like HireVue used in recruitment, right? Assessing CVs and resumes, using AI in education, using AI in autonomous vehicles, or in law enforcement, such as using facial recognition to identify criminals, for instance. So all these would be considered as high-risk AI applications, and there are conformity assessments saying that you have to really be open to be audited for your AI models if your AI falls under a high-risk model. And the limited risk would be more like chatbots, emotional recognition, biometric categorization. Then you would have to be transparent on how you develop this AI model and where does the training data come from. So they really want to see a full-fledged audit trail so that you can justify the choices you made while developing and deploying this model. All the rest is minimal risk. There are no obligations. So for instance, if you're using AI for optimization purposes, you're using your process data, there is no personally identifiable information used to train this traditional machine learning optimization model, let's say, then you do not have any obligations, right? So because this is really all about risk to the individual, risk to the privacy, security, and freedom of the individuals. That is what is takes the central stage when it comes to deciding what is high risk and what is not high risk in this framework. Clearly, there are several requirements that come with this, such as data governance, such as making sure that there is human oversight, such as making sure that we do keep the records and log the results, and etc. And I have come across a very interesting analysis of this, right? So Stanford University has a research center on human-centered AI, and one group within that center looks into foundational models, and they really dissected the AI Act to see what exactly are they going to look for, right? What exactly, if the regulator knocks on my door and says, show me the documentation you have, what exactly are they going to ask? And this is at a very high level what they present. So they will look into the data, where the data comes from, how do you govern the data, and they will ask you, are you using any copyrighted data? If so, do you have consent for it, right? So clearly the most important element is, do you have your house in order in terms of the basics, right? In terms of the core structure. The next is compute. How much computer power are you using? How about the carbon footprint, the energy consumption that you do to be able to use this model? So sustainability implications. I think this will make a big difference in terms of big versus small AI providers, right? Because we already see there's a plethora of startups in the field, but then we also have the giants like the Microsoft and Microsoft-backed OpenAI or Google. So probably there's going to be this is going to also create that differentiation, right? This might be a question mark from easiness, from the perspective of being easy to get into this industry as a player, could have implications. And then your model, what exactly does your model do? What are the risks? Have you proactively looked for the risks? Are you trying to mitigate them? Are you testing before you deploy your model? So pure risk management and doing your due diligence and being proactive in managing this is what the expectation is going to be. And finally, when it comes to deploying your model, imagine using it in a citizen-facing mobile banking app, for instance, right? So they're going to be asking, do you provide both purposeful and operational transparency, meaning that am I telling the people impacted why I'm doing this? What is the purpose? What's in it for you? What's in it for them? And also operational transparency, meaning that, what is the data that I need to train this model, and how exactly is this model operating? So really having a very clear and well thought out communication approach for this. Here is my final poll question for you. I wonder what you think. When you look into this level of detail, right, what exactly they're going to be looking at, what do you think of the impact of the EU AI Act when it comes to European competitiveness in the domain of AI? This is a big discussion, right? Every conference I go to, there's always someone that represents both sides of the coin here. They're saying that this is great. The Brussels effect is great. We've got to be the first in doing this. We're going to set the standards when it comes to responsible use of AI versus this is going to kill the competition. If we can launch the poll, please, here. What is the impact of European AI Act? Is it a friend or a foe when it comes to AI-driven competitiveness in Europe? I'm really curious to see what you think about this. And what you see here is that there's Not many of you seem to think that it's going to harm the competition. I tend to agree with you. I'm more positive on this, saying that this is all about setting the boundaries of innovation, and I think as resourceful creatures, we will find a way to be innovative about this. And now let me share also the counter argument to this with you, right? Let's stop sharing and let me share with you these contradicting or seemingly contradicting views. For instance, there is the idea of there's a report that was published saying that it could stifle generative AI innovation in Europe. Basically, the argument behind this is that regulating AI at this stage is going to make for startups much more difficult to claim a part of the market. That is the high level gist of this. That there is currently, it's basically the argument that it's eventually this may be necessary, but currently it's premature. It will slow down innovation and growth, and it will reduce consumer choice in generative AI. That is the argument in that camp. On the other hand, we also have other arguments saying that, yeah, it passed this landmark AI Act, but it is nowhere enough when it comes to being strict, right? So it has to be even more strict is the argument. They say that AI Act is too favorable to industry interests, and it can even set a bad precedent to other countries. There was recently an article in the Times magazine showing and documenting the lobbying activities done by OpenAI to kind of water down the AI Act a little bit, right? So it's clearly that definitely there has been lobbying on this topic. And the argument in that camp has been that this is really not strict enough. We should have been harder in especially big AI providers that are operating in the EU market, because similar to GDPR, as you can imagine, you don't have to be in Europe to be liable with, let's say, the AI Act. If you're using your AI model for European citizens, collecting data in Europe or processing it in Europe, then you still have to be compliant with the European AI Act. So we do see both sides of the coin. And Jamie, I'm reading what you write, saying that we should think about why there's not much innovation in the area of AI. It is true that EU has fallen behind compared to what we see in China and Europe, right? But we do also have, I'm thinking of Mistral, the French large language model, right? We do also have a couple of more initiatives coming up as well. And hopefully we will also see more impact from such large language models too. Because the current worry is, will it be like GDPR, right? I was looking into rigorous research saying that has ever there been as research done on the impact of GDPR? Because you may remember, we had very similar conversations back then on, oh, this will kill the data-driven innovation. This is creating so many loops for us to jump through and etc. I found only one research looking into mobile app marketplace, right? So the number of new entries in the mobile app marketplace, what you're seeing there, this article has been also talking about overall that there has been an 8% reduction in profits and a modest 2% decrease in sales of companies targeting EU markets that they could directly tie to data-related initiatives. And there's another article that you see there has been published, a report suggesting that, whether it's GDPR or not, when it comes to AI Act, another big part of the issue is how it's going to be enforced, right? The argument is that even just the enforcement is going to cost so much money in Europe that it's going to do more harm than good, because the current thinking is that there's going to be an AI authority, just like a data protection authority in every European country, and they're going to oversee this regulation, and they're going to be responsible from auditing and assessment of these AI models, right? So clearly, all the details surrounding enforcement is not 100% clear yet. So that's hence the worries around this issue. Now, I'm sure you have seen at least several of these on the news. In terms of intellectual property and copyright issues, I'm just showing you only a few of these litigations that are happening mostly in US. For instance, Getty Images suing Stability AI. I think this is one of the first lawsuits that has been launched. Getty Images, as you know, is a database of copyrighted images that they have taken the photos or they have created digitally. And Stability AI is a text-to-image generative AI application. And they have basically figured out that all Getty images have been used as a training material in Stability AI's capability. So Getty Images said, you didn't ask for my permission, you didn't pay for this, you're clearly infringing on my copyrights, is the core argument for all of these lawsuits that we're seeing. More recently, New York Times sued OpenAI and Microsoft for the very same thing, saying that you have used millions of articles that we had published, and now when it comes to access to information, you're even competing with us. This is not a fair game, right? This has been the overall argument on this. Some AI providers like Adobe trying to be more proactive in this matter, because also thinking about how Adobe's Firefly, which is also text-to-image generative AI capability, was trained by the art created by all the digital artists that Adobe used to hire, right? And of course, they were very upset, saying that you used our art to create this capability, and now you don't need to hire us anymore. And in response to that, for instance, Adobe said, you're right, actually, I want to recognize your contribution to me creating this capability. And they say, we're going to work on a bonus mechanism to recognize if we used your art. You can argue whether is this the best approach or not, but at least this is a really progressive approach, recognizing the contribution of artists whose art was used to create that capability. Because today, the counter argument from AI developers, for instance, Stability AI CEO said, we use millions of images that we scraped over the internet. Web scraping is not illegal, right? They said we collected all these pieces. So at the end of the day, there's no way for me to go one by one to all the owners. And in most cases, I cannot even track who the owner is. So, this is not doable, right? This is a bit the counter argument by these AI service providers or AI capability, AI companies. They also say, from a text perspective, OpenAI's argument has been like, I'm not immediately profiting from your material, thinking of New York Times or thinking of all the books, novels that has been used to train, and saying that, this is fair use, right? They say this falls under the fair use, because copyright concept is still very much rooted in the idea of making copies and deciding which copy is allowed and which copy is not allowed, right? It's a whole concept under copywriting. And I was reading, interestingly, that not every court would decide the same way. There was an interesting article saying that this is a very much vibes-based situation. So what one court decides may not be replicated in another court. So clearly, there is a change that we have to also work on in terms of getting our legal mechanisms up to speed in terms of assessing these intellectual property and copyright issues. Can you anticipate a trademark filter-like solution to protect IP? Sona, I'm not sure if I understand what you mean, but there is definitely, it makes me think of this mechanism of watermarking. But let me get to my Next slide, because I think what you're also saying may be answered in a couple of minutes. OpenAI, Sam Altman has said that it is not possible to create such high-level capability without copyrighted material, right? So the argument from AI vendors has been like, we need this. This is research, and this is fair use, right? So we are using your content to be able to create new content. We are not simply blindly copying your material. Has been the counter argument by this. But still, there are so many questions, right? First of all, this is not necessarily a universal concept. So how do we deal with different jurisdictions with different expectations? I just shared that China is quite lenient to this. As you see here, Japan is also declaring that we are not going to make this an issue. I'm not going to enforce copyright claims here. Also, how do we define, where do we draw the line, what is fair use, what is not fair use? And if all this copyrighted data can be collected with web scraping, how is it still legal? How are these contents still scrapable, right? So there are so many questions that underlie coming back to the solutions, right? Maybe we should also look into ways of creating these mechanisms for these AI vendors to make deals with these copyright or intellectual property owners, which is the first solution that comes to many of our mind, many of the people's minds. From an EU Act perspective, there has been a pushback on the copyright issue specifically. They have been asked to include, at first it wasn't a part of the copyright debate, was not a part of the EU AI Act, but back in, I think, December, negotiators agreed to include obligations for foundation models to respect the copyright law. So Europe says, there's already a copyright law here. Whatever you do with your AI, you have to comply with that models as well. But there are clauses there saying that you should be sufficiently clear when it comes to identifying whether you're using somebody else's IP or whether you're using copyrighted material, which creates the question of what do we mean it's sufficiently clear, right? Again, an issue of enforcement here also comes to mind. Now, where does this bring us, right? What do we what does this mean for your organizations who might be interested in using AI for productivity gains or for innovation purposes? We should not despair, because actually we already have means to understand what this means from a strategizing perspective, right? When it comes to using AI and deciding how it helps us gain our reach our strategic objectives. We know that there's already literature when it comes to, or research done in terms of best practices for governing AI. There's really interesting work in that link that I provide on the slide. Center for the Governance of AI is a really interesting resource for these things. I'm not showing all the results from this study. I'm just highlighting the 5 issues that was among a global set of experts that was highlighted as best practices in terms of responsible AI governance. And when you look at these 5 things, which is running pre-deployment risk assessments, so thinking of a NIST AI risk framework here or any other risk framework that forces you to proactively assess the risks before you actually deploy your AI model. 2, again, proactively assessing dangerous capabilities. This is a reference to the fact that you may be creating an AI capability for purpose A, but can it also do B, right? And can that B capability be a dangerous capability for minority groups, for instance, right? So assessing for unexpected capabilities of these AI models. Third-party model audits, which is already embedded in the AI Act today. Safety restrictions, which is the guardrails that everybody is talking about these days, right? How do we embed guardrails in the models so that they cannot be used for reasons that they are not supposed to be used for. And finally, red teaming, which is also a concept borrowed from cybersecurity, meaning that we have to be proactive, and before the threat actors do, we should be able to go ahead and try and break the model and find the vulnerabilities so we can fix these things before they are exploited. When you think about these things, these all refer to the expectations of the strictest AI regulation we have today, which is the EU AI Act, right? So we already have some suggestions on how to get started even before the AI Act is enforced. So in the midterm focus, what comes to mind is getting the basics right. When I say basics, I'm talking about data governance and data management, right? Whether it's AI or analytics, your core capability that the success of these models depend on is your data governance framework in your organization. So getting the right data, getting data right is still the most important, maybe not as exciting as developing an AI model, but still the most important capability today for organizations that are thinking about this. And coming back to the options, so maybe we don't need a trademark filter, maybe we can have large language models without copyrighted material. There's quite a few initiatives on this. First, large language model that is the clean large language model that has been trained without copyrighted content is out there. And from what I've read, of course, from a performance perspective, it is not on par with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, right? But it doesn't mean that it will not get better. So that is there, and there's a startup NGO called Fairly Trained that actually looks into protecting the rights of creators. They give a stamp of approval for large language models, saying that yes, this one does not include any copyrighted material, or it does include copyrighted material, but it has gone through the usual or expected mechanisms to get the okay from the copyright owners, right? So there's a lot of movement in the field is my message. So questioning your choices, looking around for alternatives, and experimenting with these can be an option for you in the midterm. But the long-term focus is, of course, having an established approach to responsible AI governance. I've come across a report by the government of Singapore that publishes some of these best practices, which I found to be very applicable and interesting. And they are talking about the importance of having an internal governance structure and measuring this. And this implies, of course, having clear roles and responsibilities, risk management, upskilling everyone in the organization so that AI as an approach is demystified. And I also hear a lot ethics advisory boards today. I also hear bad examples, cases where this whole thing is taken out of context. So it's not that every organization must have an ethics advisory board, but this is one of the approaches that I hear a lot in terms of, checking, am I doing the right things, or is there anything that I'm maybe missing out? The other thing is the level of human involvement. So human in the loop or over the loop as an oversight mechanism is another best practice to see some of these potential issues, and having a specific focus on AI operations management, meaning that, this debiasing, checking data quality, managing the models is not a one-time effort. This is an initiative that you should go ahead as long as you are working on or have AI initiatives in the organization. And finally, the communication aspect is as important, because the expectation of all these regulations is transparency, right? You have to be transparent in terms of to your employees when it comes to what fair use policy is, or to customers who may be impacted by the AI model that you're deploying. So these are more long-term efforts compared to the other issue we mentioned. But I think if you're asking what can I already start doing today, tomorrow, I think with these things considered, compliance by design is achievable when it comes to AI Act, and you should really start by checking your exposure. Do you have already a working AI system as defined by the AI Act? In order to be all encompassing, the AI definition in this regulation is extremely broad. You'll be surprised, right? So please check your exposure. Do you and check whether you what you have would be deemed as high risk or not. So these are important realizations for you to have. And on that link that I shared earlier, compliance checker, you can actually see already whether what your level of obligation from an AI Act perspective is. And start with creating an organization-wide awareness plan. Do you already keeping track of your model development initiatives? Do you have technical documentation? Are you testing? Are you also documenting your testing process? So these are also things that you can immediately start working on. But maybe the most important thing to highlight is the fact that you cannot do this alone. This is not just the job of your compliance team, who may not be familiar with AI, right? And this is not the job of your data science team, who are not necessarily who are far away from the compliance landscape. So this does require a multidisciplinary approach in the organization. I think these things are the things that you can immediately start thinking about today in terms of getting one step closer to being compliant. All right, this is what I wanted to share with you today. Let me quickly take a look. I hope this was interesting. There is a question on top emerging AI courses, certifications. It's very interesting. There's a couple of, first of all, there's no global consensus on this, right? There's a couple of nonprofits. I'm thinking of All Tech Human is one very well-regarded NGO that is offering certification on this. Maybe we should expect a certification consolidation too. I wouldn't be surprised to see that, but there are individual and separate initiatives that are offering courses on this because we already know that the Commission is hiring algorithmic auditors, right? What kind of skill set do I need to have to be an algorithmic auditing? I tend to think that's the job of the future as well, to be able to assess an algorithm from its ethical implications, legal implications, the data and the software development undertakings of this model, and etc. So having that multidisciplinary skill set seems to me that's going to be really important going ahead. Any questions, anyone? I think I have time maybe to take one more question. Seems to be that I did touch base almost on all of these questions. Thank you for sharing the link, Tom, to the Fate Catcher. Okay, that now I do remember the name. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for interacting with me through the chat. Thank you for your attention. And again, hope this was interesting. And I'm wishing you all the best in your initiatives in this new and very exciting domain. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.